So we're going to start by opening up to some questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Larry has a mic. He'll come around. Please wait till he gets to you so that we can hear and record your question appropriately. Thanks.
Yes, hi. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment that I found the process of abstraction when in reference to the exploration of the nature of consciousness and the micro-macrocosm to be paradoxically a process of alienation from knowledge. And that in my experience, and maybe you can speak to this, the intellect needs to be surrendered in order to experience our integration. There's the jnana in yoga, jnana yoga, which is an intellectual form to bring one to, I think, this stoppage of abstraction. What do you think are the limits of conceptualization in terms of really understanding the integral nature of human to cosmic consciousness? What are the limits?
Well, as someone who likes to think of themselves as a philosopher and a metaphysician, I hope there aren't any limits. I really value a certain kind of intellectual activity. There is a form of intellect that, that form of intellect that drives what's called. Is this on? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
What drives scientific materialism and techno-scientific manipulation of the natural world, that form of intellect that removes human consciousness from its ecological embeddedness and thinks of nature as just a collection of objects and so on. That's obviously a very destructive form of intelligence, but I don't think it's the only form. I think we can reform the intellect that we've inherited from a few thousand years of Western civilization, so that the mind is more in tune with the planetary ecology with which, and the interplanetary ecology within which it's embedded. Maybe you prefer to call that intuition instead of intellect. We can come up with a different word for it, but I think it's still a capacity of the mind seeking understanding of the universe. And keeping in mind that there is a form of intellect that is destructive, mind in general is wider than that. It's wider than just the calculating, manipulative form of rational modern consciousness that we've come to associate with mind in our culture. So the mind in a more general sense doesn't have any limits. We're going to keep... Fortunately, neither does the universe have limits. So as much as we come to know it, the more there will be for us to come to know. So there's not like an end to this process of discovery, but I don't think that we're going to reach the limits of understanding, as long as we keep in mind the caveats that I just laid out.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe too loud. I like your question a lot. I feel like, in agreement with Matt and you, I feel like there is a level of intuitional knowing that's crucial for our the evolution of our consciousness. It's not just intellectual rigor that's going to provide the fullest meaning to our lives and to the universe, but it is the modern intellectual mind that's in control of the world that we live in today, in the sense of the controls of power. And it's that mind that needs to be convinced of a transcendent dimension of reality in order for our evolution to hopefully move into that understanding, which at current it doesn't recognized in the academic spheres. So what I'm trying to show in my talk is that the astrological perspective is different in a sense than any other paradigm methodology that I'm aware of, in the sense that it is grounded in nature and in time and in mathematics. There's an empiricism to it. With Cosmos and Psyche, Rick Tarnas puts forth how cultural history, not just an individual human psyche, say Sigmund Freud's chart, how we see him, but the 1960s, the 90s, there's planetary alignments that are coloring the entire cultural sphere, the cultural psyche at large. So it's not just individuals. So what I was trying to say is there's an empiricism there, potential for our capacity to see an objective reality that's grounded in nature, in the sense that ecology, the largest patterns in nature we're aware of are the planets. So they're not actually separate from us, and they seem to provide the capacity for us to see a level of objectivity that's not even recognized by the postmodern paradigm as it exists now. It doesn't see a capacity to see a ground of meaning that we can judge things by. And I'm suggesting that you can actually see through Sigmund Freud's birth chart, his psychology, and we have the capacity to move into an objective relationship to Sigmund Freud's psyche and his being and life in a way that is not accessible in any other way. There's a level of seeing his psyche grounded in time and in nature that, in my understanding, is not. I've never found anything that allows us that, or affords us this capacity of objectivity. So I think it actually, I'm hoping that it actually has a level of intellect and empiricism that can move the modern academic rigid mind towards a transcendent understanding. So that's my hope.
I wanted to this one, to add this wonderful conversation. We, in the words of Rupert Sheldrake, we need to get back to a state of re-enchantment with nature. You see, and I think this is what potent psychedelics can do. And we're running out of time. I mean, we're really trashing the planet. So this is pretty urgent business. But my personal experience is that, and that's sort of what I try to get across when I do my ceremonies and, my work with this medicine.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Did you want to comment on that? Okay.
Is this one on? Yes, no? All right. Yeah, just one. Okay. Yeah, we can share. Thanks for bringing up disenchantment and enchantment, because that's also another point that I think we all would concur around in terms of what happened in the transition from the archaic to the axial into the modern time periods and into the postmodern, is this continual disenchantment of the universe and the world and humans' place in it. And so in the image that Chad was showing, where at the bottom we have this postmodern consciousness that might as well, or maybe is, this meaningless speck of dust, and like what's going on out there, who knows. That's pervasive in our culture globally now. We see that in the way it brings, the way that it incorporates into ecology and the environment, and how we do or don't have regard for nature and other species, and why it's easy to look at natural resources as that resources for our consumption without necessarily forward thought or even the consciousness of maybe the river has the right to flow. For example, there was a course I took here called Earth Law in the past year that really examined these questions. Well, what right does the river have to simply flow? Because that's what a river does. So how can we expand our consciousness to include these other questions and interspecies and interdimensional and cosmic beings? And I think astrology and perhaps co-participatory ecological inquiry really helps us to to look at this beyond our anthropocentric view. And what was the awesome term? Decentric, yes, decentralizing ourselves. Too many syllables in there at once. And something that was shared with me recently by a woman that works a lot in medicine work and also in Native American traditions. We were talking about the purpose of integration and the need for integration of not only entheogenic and psychedelic experiences, but also the integration of these different perspectives and worldviews into the cosmology that we are living right now. And she said, what we are looking at is this like massive soul loss on this, cosmic level. It's not just humans, it's not just the dying species, like this massive soul loss on the universal level. And so what are the tools for bringing that back? And she said 4 things. She said, singing, dancing, silence, and nature. And so maybe we put that back through the human lens for a moment. And she said, when did you stop singing? I mean, think about that. Like, how many of us actually sing in our daily life? How many of us maybe were shamed at some point for singing, or you don't have a good voice or whatever, or just never ever even took that risk? And then when did you stop dancing? How many of us are sitting in a car, going to a place to sit, and how can we move with more fluidity and embodiment through our lives? And when can we come to silence? So singing and dancing also being a lot of movement of energy, but how can we come to that point where we touch in and resource from silence and the gems and treasures that are there? And how can we maybe do any or all of those in nature too, where we really transcend the human experience, and I think if we're available to it, become aware of a larger dimension of interconnectivity and co-participatory awesomeness. So,
I'll just briefly say something about enchantment. I think that is really crucial to the struggle that we're engaged in right now. This notion of disenchantment comes from the German sociologist Max Weber, who was writing about the rise of capitalism. And it's essential for capitalist social relations that human beings have a disenchanted relationship to nature. Nature, if we still related to it as animate, as ensouled, as intelligent, and so on, couldn't be treated as a collection of objects, right? So this modern capitalist understanding of nature and its relationship to the human being is that nature is just sort of raw material, valueless, purposeless, meaningless, no agency, and that only human beings have agency, and through our labor we go and we shape raw, dead matter into something that can then be sold in the marketplace, and then it has value after the human being has used its labor to make it into something useful. I think the number one, I won't be that overblown. I'll just say one of the best ways we can counter capitalism and consumerism and the form of economic, social relations that's and natural relations that's destroying the planet is by coming into a re-enchanted relationship with the natural world, finding meaning and purpose and value in the natural world as it exists independently of the human marketplace. All those aspects of the natural world that can't be commodified, though they're fewer and fewer every day, they're still there, and we need to find them, and we need to enter into sacred relationships with them.
That's great, man. I'll comment on that too real quick. And I feel like the astrological perspective has the capacity to re-enchant in the sense that we're talking about symbolic consciousness and language that you were describing, and also, we're really looking for living symbols that aren't just the dead letter, but are actually living embodiments of signs from the universe, which the planets actually are. That they're symbols that are grounded in nature and living, and they specifically talk to us in a very specific way, in nuanced ways, and to correlate the depth of our own psyche to the whole. So it's a matter of moving towards a recognition that, like you were saying, nature is sacred, and that is extended to the whole. One thing about Rupert Sheldrake you were mentioning, I don't know if you know about this, that new manifesto for a post-materialist science, which Rupert Sheldrake is one of the 8 authors, someone from IONS and Larry Dossey, and I'm not sure who else, but they're basically suggesting that we need a new post-materialist science that doesn't preface or give preeminence to, that's not the word I want to use, to the material first, like you were saying, mind and matter come together, or I'm not exactly sure what you said, but what they're saying in the manifesto is that they're synonymous, that matter doesn't come prior, that mind is at least equal to the material, and that it's not a derivative of the material. And this is one of their main statements in their new manifesto for a new science. And I think it's going to take something like that to absorb the astrological perspective, because the empiricism that I'm describing is a nuanced empiricism. It's not a testable, or a testable in the sense of like repeatable, testable scientific things. Like science as it exists today would want the same chart to produce the same person over and over again. That's not what is happening. Each soul is a unique incarnate embodiment of that chart that you're born into. You're a unique expression and embodiment of the archetypes that you're born into.
The archetypes were just dead symbols. That's what you would expect. That
right, exactly.
Every person born
if
on the
they were
same day
just
would be the
hydraulic.
same, but they're living symbols.
Exactly, exactly. So, I don't know if that helps, but
Is this on? Yeah. Okay.
Turn number 8 up a little bit.
I think I'm having a bit of an epiphany here about consciousness that I want to try and express, because you guys have said some things that have triggered me. So I've had a lot of psychedelic experience, and I've had experience in self-reflection. And the feeling I'm getting right now is that normally, like when we see, we look out, we're sort of looking out through our eyes and we see what's here, but we can't really see behind us. But the eye of consciousness seems to be different. It seems to be like all-pervasive, and it seems to be not looking outwardly but looking inwardly. And I see a picture in my mind of what I think is called zero-point energy, where there's just this point, and then out of that point goes up and around, back down, and into itself. So and if you look at it, it's just the point, but this energy is coming out of the point and back into itself. So that's how I see the eye of consciousness. And the eye of consciousness is looking in, and what manifests in the center is an aspect of itself that it's now visualizing through perception, which for us is we are an aspect of existence that is providing existence with a frame of reference on itself through our own perception of how we see, hear, feel, and everything. So existence is waking up to its own self through our perception, and consciousness is looking in from all around, and it sees whatever manifests in the center, and that is an aspect of itself. So consciousness is visualizing an aspect of what it is, like existence is visualizing an aspect of what it is, and it's only an aspect of itself. So anything that we can say about consciousness or existence is just a particular frame of reference in which to look at the whole. So I think consciousness is already there, and this idea of eco-consciousness is interesting, but it's from a perspective of being like in the center and looking out and seeing eco-consciousness. But since consciousness is all pervasive, and outside that even, it's looking in and it sees, oh, I'm an eco-consciousness too. So it's the revelation of something to its own existence is what I'm getting at, and I think we are, that aspect of existence that allows it to perceive itself. And I don't think we're individual beings at all anymore. I think we're all connected in this consciousness that's waking up, and so we're vehicles for which this happens. And the idea that we're beings is just one aspect of the way of looking at it. That is as far as we've evolved to this point. But that's going to change as we identify more and more with consciousness itself as a whole.
I agree. Well said.
I can't add anything.
It reminds me of Alex Gray's universal mind lattice image. It's like it's going in and out, and I totally agree. I feel like it's self-reflective consciousness that's evolving, and the self-reflection is the self-reflection of the universe itself. We are vessels of the universe reflecting on itself, just like you were describing.
Question. Could I throw a question?
Please.
Let me just say one quick thing to that. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. One of our teachers, Brian Swim, talks a lot about this, and a close friend of Thomas Berry's, who suggests that we're not just a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects. And in that spirit of being a communion of subjects and this self-reflective capacity that we like to think is showing up in the human, it may be showing up elsewhere in the universe. I think it probably is, but what I think about a lot is being self-reflective pieces of consciousness of the universe. What responsibility comes with that? How can we ignore the ecological devastation? How can we completely dismiss astrology if we are participating in that way of self-reflective consciousness? So, and then the other thing I want to say is, well, as you were talking, I just got the image of a toroid, which is what you were just describing too. So if you don't know what that is, you can look it up. It's pretty fantastic.
Taurus, yeah.
Yeah, toroidal energy. Yeah, the torus or toroidal energy, and the heart is actually an organ that generates an energy field that is of that shape. So if you imagine a donut of energy that's circulating around, so it's having this experience of being outside itself, looking in, and also going through that transformation in the center. So, yeah, I'll stop there.
I have a question of you. It's the two of you, it almost like it was orchestrated in a nice way, because you came to the collapse point and you came to the shifting of the point of the earth becoming the sun, becoming the many suns. So I'm thinking that I was thinking of Paul Klee and how he looked at the point as being all points that could ever exist, and that's a real interesting thing, because I don't think we know how to symbolize or to conceptualize in outside of language yet what this is. I mean, Aurobindo tried it, with the integral philosophy. So we have categories, but to live it, like Natalie was saying, talking about living it. One of you guys were talking about living it. It means being in three places at once, which means there's a fourth place that starts to involute and expand. So it's a dimension. It's a dimensional thing that we don't even know how to draw in perspective yet. I mean, I had to learn how to draw in three dimensions. You have to kind of chart it out with geometry. So it's something about how the symbols. You both caught it from a different end, and I think it was powerful. So,
thank you.
I think we probably have time for maybe one more question, because we're close to. So.
Hi, I was hoping you could touch on using astrological transits for prediction of psychedelic experience, and how an individual might be able to integrate that into their own practice, and if you think that it has the possibility of being used with all the psychedelic research and therapy that's going on currently.
Yeah, actually, great question. Thank you. I do actually talk to Rick about a month ago about potentially accessing Rick Doblin's MDMA research studies and looking at, he had 80% success with post-traumatic stress therapy, and I'm really curious to see what the 20%, what their transits were, and what, potentially you would see, hard aspect Saturn transits per se type of thing that prevented them from having a breakthrough. It's research yet to be done, but from Rick and Stan's research, there are ways in which you can help, facilitate more positive experiences with the aid of Jupiter tends to be supportive, but there's so many ways in which any individual enters into a psychedelic experience. Let me give you context. Like, some people have a really strong egoic structure. They're going to need a little bit more potency in their experience to kind of break through that. Some people have a very sensitive ego structure that allows them to access transcendent states much more easily. Those two different type of people would very likely like to have different types of transits, because the strong egoic person would potentially need more catalyst energy to help transcend or to break through the ego, and the more sensitive person wouldn't want as much intense transit energy because they're already so sensitive if they're going to be doing a non-ordinary state specifically. Does that make sense? So it would be something that would be individual, but I guess, I mean, it's probably too difficult to answer this in this context, but I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. Basically, you want to maximize supportive transits and minimize the difficult ones, especially when it's work that you're doing for the first time. That's really the crucial part on many levels, because when you go into some experience the first time, it really colors, in large measure, the way you'll experience that substance from then on. So you really want to have an initial positive experience that can help you move with your work, with that medicine. And then I guess, yeah, I guess that's where I'll leave it for now. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. Mm-hmm.
He's the expert.
One more question?
Phenomenology. When you were saying that what science has discovered, you need a new approach, and they discovered this a while back, and it's tough for them to break out of the paradigm. I used to be affiliated with them in the science, so that's what they liked it, but it gets kind of fall away, and then maybe I'm so glad to hear, because the phenomenology's been around for a while. It's been questions to get right outside of that traditional scientific positivism thinking. So it's good to hear.
Yeah. Thanks.
Most Westerners don't know that Pavlov's dogs were almost killed in a flood. And when Pavlov came back from that, they had all forgotten their training. But the Russians knew this, and the Chinese knew this, and they used that to change society on a large scale quickly. I have doubts about psychedelics being able to do this because of the violence. We haven't yet solved all the violence that children are exposed to, and are, disinhibiting people on that large of a scale is too problematic, especially because there's no off switch for psychedelics necessarily. But I have hope for technology like Oculus Rift and transcranial. I have personally had psychedelic experiences in an Oculus Rift with some special visualization technology that let me see my body as though it was mercury. So technology, and that you can turn off in a switch. So that may be one path we can get to retrain the populace to get beyond our inculcation of us being over nature and using it only to our purposes. That's just a thought.
No, good.
Well, just that I think psychedelics will be a powerful tool in this transformation, but the rate at which technology is moving forward, it's obvious that our consciousness will not be anything like it is today 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I mean, everyone on the street has a smartphone now. 10 years ago, we couldn't even have imagined that would be the case. Who would have thought that we would have needed to carry around this thing in our pockets to feel like a complete human person, So what's it going to be in the next 10 years? I don't know. But and it's not just full speed ahead, this is going to be great. I think there's a lot of worry about who owns these technologies, why are they trying to sell them to us other than the profit motive, like surveillance, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of reasons to be worried about technological implants, because what's the next step after a smartphone? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
they already know where you are.
So let's hang on for the ride, I guess.
I agree with you. I think technology is a little suspect on some level. I honestly trust the entheogens. It's a time-tested tradition, that ancient technology, and I really like Terence McKenna's idea that psilocybin mushrooms actually catalyzed our language-forming capacities. On high-dosage mushrooms, you go into what's called glossalia, and you speak in tongue. It's very possibly where language-forming capacities originate. our capacity to make symbol out of the word or out of sound. So I trust in the natural world in many ways. I guess back to the topic, the LSD, the invention of it it's a bit like the Copernican revolution on some levels. I mean, in the sense that it was a necessary thing. One thing, we're only 3 billion people on the planet in 1960. It took us 200,000 years to get to 3 billion people, and now there's 7.5 in the last 50. We've more than doubled what we had. It took us 200,000 years. We did it in 50 years. There's a much greater need for more people to go through initiation rites of passage, and LSD, luckily, provided that capacity. It was the most potent, smallest substance we have to initiate atomic psychological transformation in the mind. But again, it's a hybrid. I mean, it's a semi-synthetic substance. It's based out of a fungus, and then it's used, man did what we needed to do with it to have all this take place ultimately. So I still trust in psychedelics, but I guess back to my initial point is that I think the astrological perspective actually provides a level of empiricism to point to the transcendent that no other methodology that I'm aware of does that. That's actually grounded in math, nature, and time. That's just my opinion, and I'm willing to talk to anyone about that if they have other perspectives that do that. I'd love to talk about it. But
I remember being 12 years old, and I was talking with someone who was probably about 15 years older than me, and we were talking about cell phones, and this was back in the day when it wasn't even called a cell phone, it was called a car phone. It was like in a big bag. And he looked at me and said, yeah, well, someday you're going to have a phone that just like rings to your pocket. And I was like, I kind of believe you. I don't want to believe you. I felt conflicted because it seemed really cool, but it also seemed like, wait a minute, there's going to be a thing that rings to everyone going to have my own number? What does that mean? Well, how many of us are semi-tethered to our smartphones in some way of our daily relating? So that has happened. And I also believe in the healing potential of working with psychedelics and entheogens. And it's like an analogy of putting the knife in the hands of a butcher or a serial killer. It's like you can use the tool as responsibly or not. And so I encourage us to continue to stay in the dialogue and polylog of using these tools, looking at them as sacred technology and using them responsibly and cultivating that within our culture so that there can be transformation that I think they have a unique potential to catalyze. We are out of time. I have some gifts for Matt and Chad here, some chocolate from our dear friend Brian Wallace. And thank you.